Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. Kirk Cameron can go fuck himself.
Yeah.
Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. My name is Jake, a former evangelical turned queer sex therapist turned eschatologist, apparently, the study of the end of the world.
Oh, I didn't.
And I'm honored to once again be joined by the jubilant, joyful, jazzy, jocular, and judicious Brooke, who is just jaded enough to justify joining Jake, me, in joking about James's judgmental junkyard of a job.
Wow. I gotta say, in the last episode, I was like, I only got one. But then it was a pretty funny joke. But this time, I'm like, okay.
I tried to make up for it.
Yeah, you did. Okay. Did you call me jocular?
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Like
Like a jock.
fraternal, almost. Like, there's like a sense of playfulness, a little bit of roughhousing, but not like horribly so.
Like the big brother you never had, but you did have it. And actually, so did I, so never mind.
Like the big brother we both had. Brooke, how are you doing?
Doing great, Jake, since we last checked in. And just hanging out. Is it Christmas yet?
I'm not actually sure what order these episodes are going to come out in,
Okay.
so maybe.
Great. Well, Merry Christmas. Or maybe it passed, in which case, hope you had a lovely Christmas.
I hope you're enjoying your winter festivities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your Christmas, maybe not your Christmas.
Exactly.
That will make no sense if they haven't heard the episode.
Yeah, if this comes out first, don't worry about it. We put part 2 out first and then part 1, and that'll make it real spicy.
How are you feeling about the state of the world? Ready for it to end?
Yeah, I'm ready to be raptured. I'm ready to be left behind. Whatever. I don't care anymore. Do whatever. It's all going to implode.
It's a fun thought process. Like, what would happen if all of the current evangelicals were actually raptured?
That would be so good. I mean, I'd be a fan.
I read...
It would work for everyone. They want it. We want it. Mm-hmm. Do it.
I read a short story a little bit ago where it happened, like the rapture actually happened, and the main character, like time jumped like 10 years ahead of time. Like, oh wow, the world's such a utopia now. What happened? Like, oh, the rapture happened. Like, oh, the Antichrist is here. It's just like some cool guy.
Yeah.
Now all those annoying fucks are gone. Things are actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, right. That's right. That reminds me of that meme that's like, if men didn't exist, who would protect you? And then the women are like, from who?
Exactly. From bears.
I choose the bear.
My favorite men are bears.
Yeah.
Shout out Gary.
Oh, Gary. Oh, we used Gary's real name.
Yeah. Oh, we did.
I think we've done that before, actually.
Yeah.
So, Gary, you're in.
Last week, we took a deep dive into the book Left Behind and its depiction of the rapture. We also talked in depth about the timeline it lays out for the supposed period of tribulation afterward. It was all very, very silly. I've labeled this episode Left Behinder. I don't know if that's funny or not.
I mean, I think it's funny.
Today...
Wait, but add a thing. Left behind her.
Left Behinder, barely even know her.
Uh-oh. This is the third one we've recorded today, and we got the silly... Do you want to talk about something else?
Nope. I put way too much work into this to not talk about it. My poor boyfriend has been suffering.
I thought I'd give it a try.
One time I was like recounting what I'm talking about, what I'm writing, what I'm researching, and my boyfriend very lovingly goes, "I'm worried about you."
Sometime, maybe like on my birthday next year or something, can you come in and then be like, actually, we're just gonna like talk about Drag Race.
I almost wrote an entire episode being like, actually, we're going to talk about Wicked today. I saw the Wicked movie over Thanksgiving. Life-changing experience.
Okay, first of all, Grandma, I love that you called it the Wicked movie.
As opposed to the stage show, which I have also watched many times on YouTube.
On the YouTube. And also, I want everyone to know that Jake wrote that my boyfriend and I are defying gravity together.
I sure did. I will not apologize for being... Honestly, it's not the loving part that's gross. It's the, like, theater kid energy that should be embarrassing.
Haha, I got you to talk about something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the cultural impact of Left Behind. And to do that, we're going to be focusing on 3 different adaptations of the story. A 2000s movie, a 2014 movie, and a 2023 movie.
2023? I didn't know that.
I've watched all of them. For this series, I just want you to know I read the book, listened to the audiobook, and there were differences, watched 3 different movies.
Jake.
I am not doing great mentally.
Yeah, I'm with boyfriend. Maybe it's time to read a different author for a minute.
This isn't Dobson. This is a different author.
I mean, maybe a different oeuvre.
Then we won't have a show.
Okay. Readers, you want to hear about other stuff, right?
You want to capitalize on my suffering? That's what podcasts are.
Readers, Jake might not be okay.
So before we get started, a brief recap of the story.
Please, because I was barely able to process what I was hearing. Okay, I'll do it. Ray is a pilot.
Yep.
He's married to a lady.
Yep.
Irene.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And she's recently an evangelical.
Yep.
They have a daughter named Chloe, which is a youthful name for a 20-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And he's flying his plane and he's trying to hit on Hattie, the flight attendant, but also secret minion to the Antichrist, but she doesn't know he's the Antichrist. She's a busy lady. And then suddenly, whoop, there's a rapture. And the clothes are neatly folded. And the hearing aids are left behind because they're the devil's hearing aids. And then Buck is on the plane. And Buck eventually is going to fall in love with Ray's daughter, Chloe, who has some chocolate on her mouth, which is real
Very
infantilized and pretty gross. And he wants to buy her some cookies. And then it's the part where I started. Listen, I'm going to be really honest. Sometimes I dissociate and I just start like doing Christmas shopping in my head. But
oh yeah, because I'm emotionally present while I'm writing all this.
it's not that you're not brilliant. It's just that I get sad and scared and I'm trying to stay emotionally healthy. Okay, so then they go to the UN and the Antichrist is there and his name is Nikolai Carpathia.
You are so good with the names.
Yeah, I like names. And he shoots a guy and the bullet goes through his head and shoots another guy. And he tells Hattie to move. And the Rock of the Mound. And then some plagues. And then Kirk Cameron. Here we are.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, great.
That actually was a really good recap.
Okay, good.
Left behind is the story of 2 men, Rayford Steele, who's a pilot, and journalist Buck Williams, as they navigate the world post-rapture. They both become Christians by the end of the book, thanks to their pastor, Bruce Barnes. Also, his daughter Chloe is there. There's also a character named Hattie, who worked with Ray and had a weird, forced relationship with Buck because they want to have intersecting storylines, I guess. Hattie does not become a Christian. The book ends, as you mentioned, with Nikolai Carpathia, the Antichrist and new leader of the UN. In this meeting, he shoots 2 people and brainwashes everyone to believe it was an assassination attempt. Buck is spared because he's a Christian now, and there's like 15 other books in the original series detailing the rest of the 7 years of tribulation until Jesus' return.
And a lot of spin-offs.
So many spin-offs.
And including one that is really overlooked, but I think one of the best ones, which is called Hattie the Baddie.
Hattie the Baddie!
Yeah, and it's just kind of about like, you know, what Hattie ends up doing.
It's her pre-rapture life. Just like a slice of life.
She's like, I really want to be a flight attendant and a minion to the devil.
This book is the most well-known piece of the series, as evidenced by the fact that there's like 4 different movie adaptations about it, and no one cares about the 8th book. This is a 3-act play. So we're going to talk first about the 2000s movie.
Okay.
We open on Kirk Cameron portraying Buck Williams.
And then we immediately turn it off and go find something else to do.
He survives the assault on Israel by Russia. They're convinced that Russia is going to try to destroy Israel. Whatever. This book is a fairly faithful adaptation of the book, so I'm not going to go beat by beat retelling the story. Small changes exist, mostly relational ones, like Rayford and Hattie already have a physical relationship with each other. Buck and Hattie have an established relationship already, etc., etc. We start to see the more direct political agenda throughout this movie in relatively subtle ways. Militarization starts much earlier. Police enforce curfews the night of the rapture. A guy, when discussing peace in the Middle East, grossly says, "When their children cry from hunger, the Arabs will cry for peace." Buck's news organization that falls prey to the Antichrist propaganda is called Global News Network, or GNN. Creative.
Oh, and he's Kirk Cameron the whole time.
Uh-huh.
Is he going to kiss a 20-year-old? Nope.
Put it in that. I honestly don't have a ton to say about this movie. It's pretty bad, but not like in really interesting ways. I do find its place in the timeline of Left Behind really interesting. It was made and released in 2000, so pretty shortly after the first book came out in 94, 95. The book series was about halfway done at the time of its release, so the book series wasn't finished. And at the time of the film's release, the film was promoted by its creators as being, quote, the biggest and most ambitious Christian film ever made.
Yeah.
It was released on DVD on Halloween 2000, and it had a subsequent theatrical run starting February 2001. And this book was panned by critics. It has a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 3.4 out of 10, and it scored a 22 out of 100 on Metacritic. The Washington Post's Desson Howe described it as, quote, a blundering cringe fest thanks to unintentionally laughable dialogue, hackneyed writing, and uninspired direction. The more this movie tries, the worse it gets. Its sincerity ends up becoming a bulging bullseye for Rotten Tomato throwers. It made about $4 million in the box office, which is pretty dismal for a movie that cost about $17.4 million to make.
Wow.
It got more back in the DVD sales. I think it basically broke even in the end. Tim LaHaye, author of Left Behind, hated this movie to the point that he sued the studio who made it in 1999 before the film actually came out.
I've got to watch this.
No, you don't.
Oh,
There's other ones that you do, not this one. Despite this being received so negatively, this movie had 2 sequels covering the next 2 books in the series. Yeah. We're not going to be talking about those. I didn't watch those. I might
Why
watch
would they
them.
make sequels to something that bombed?
Because Kirk Cameron's in it.
Oh, right.
We should take a step back for a second. Who is Kirk Cameron? I don't have notes about this. But
Okay.
I know him only as the fucking crazy Christian guy.
Oh, you do?
I have since learned about his past, but that's the main thing I know him for.
The main thing and the only thing I know him for is Growing Pains.
Mm-hmm.
Growing Pains was a sitcom in the 80s. It was not religious. It was just a family sitcom where Alan Thicke was the dad and he played a shrink.
Alan Thicke was the dad?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And he was a therapist. And Joanna Kearns was the mom. And she was like a working lady, journalist or something. And then, yeah, they were the Seavers. Show me that smile, oh, show me that smile. And Leonardo DiCaprio was on it.
What?
Yes.
Oh my God.
That was that. Oh my God. Yeah. It was, he comes in the middle. It's one of those shows that was on too long, so they had to start adding weird characters. Mm-hmm. And he was like a runaway or something. This was like when the Kirk Cameron and Tracy Gold were the older teens, and so when they aged kind of out, and then they like lived in the guest house or whatever.
Sure.
They had to, they do the thing where they bring in more younger kids. So she had a like late life baby and that whole thing that sitcoms do. But anyway, Leonardo DiCaprio, who was like 15 or something, was on the show, and he was so dreamy, and that was the beginning of Leonardo DiCaprio from Growing Pains. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then there was like another kid on that show, and I don't know, poor guy. He was not Leonardo DiCaprio.
Not everyone can be.
No, not everyone can be. What would happen to that guy? Anyway, it was not at all religious, and in fact, it was like Kirk Cameron, Mike Seaver, and he had a best friend named Boner.
What?
Yeah, his best friend's name was Boner, and he was a womanizer, Mike Seaver. And he always had like hot ladies in his house, and he was like, blah, blah. So all to say that like this character he played in the 80s was why it was shocking when in 2000, we kids from the 80s all learned that he had this radical religious transformation.
Yeah.
Because it made zero sense. If he had always been evangelical, he would never have played Mike Seaver. So he must have converted at some point. Mm-hmm. And he took his sister with him, I guess. But
the knowledge I have of him is he played 80s heartthrob womanizer and then really was Christian, and that's the most thing he's known for now. I've only ever seen him in these Christian movies. There's one called Fireproof that we should probably watch at some point. That's a horrible movie. Anyway, he's the star of this. He was such a big name, especially at this time, and he wasn't. This is kind of the movie that outed him as a fundamentalist hack. Also, he's not a good actor.
no.
I don't. Anyway,
He was a cute 80s boy with moppy hair. That's why.
Sure, like Brad Pitt?
Okay, shut up.
I couldn't remember his name.
Yes, you... Okay, is this a giant troll? Are you trolling me? Is this are you and Jordan playing some, like, long con on me? Jake... Okay, readers, Jake...
I haven't seen any Brad Pitt movies, apparently.
Jake doesn't know who Brad Pitt is. And it is... I don't understand.
Apparently, he's very attractive. I've seen pictures. He's fine.
Apparently, he's very attractive. Like, I made this person up. It's like one of the biggest celebrities in the world. Like,
to me, he's most known for being married to Angelina Jolie.
No, he's most known for being married to Jennifer Aniston and then cheating on her with Angelina Jolie.
He cheated on her with Angelina Jolie?
Yes! Okay, where were you? What was happening in your life in 2004 and 5?
I was 7.
God. How do we know each other? This is so bizarre. Okay.
We have to get back to this.
I'm sorry.
We have so much to get to.
I'm sorry. I'm trying so hard to distract you away from this. Okay, I'll stop. But Brad Pitt is famous, and you need to accept that.
I know he's famous. I just don't think he's that hot.
Well, not now. Now he looks like a scraggly beach man. But in the Thelma and Louise Brad Pitt.
Okay. I'll accept that.
Thank you. Carry on.
That's the only Brad Pitt movie I've seen because I'm gay. Okay, Tim LaHaye hated this movie. He sued the studio.
Everybody just take a breath.
LaHaye settled his lawsuit against the studio for making this movie in 2008. So it was in litigation for almost a decade. And he said, quote, "My dream has always been to enter the movie theater with a first-class, high-quality movie that's grippingly interesting, but also is true to the biblical storyline. And that was diluted in the first attempt. I don't actually understand their criticism of it." Back to the quote, "But Lord willing, we're going to see this thing made into the movie that it should be, and all the world sees it before the real rapture comes." And then in 2014, LaHaye got his wish. Left Behind 2014. This movie has a crazy cast. It's probably the quote-unquote best movie of all of them. It's by far the most mainstream. It stars Nicolas Cage.
It does? Is he Buck?
He's Ray.
Oh, right.
Buck is Chad Michael Murray.
Wait, who's Chad Michael Murray?
One Tree Hill, Gilmore Girls, Dawson Creek.
Gilmore Girls?
Uh-huh.
Who?
Tristan DeGray in Gilmore Girls.
Oh, Tristan. He was one of the teens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
Chad Michael Murray, I find it interesting because he's more like a 90s, early 2000s teen heartthrob.
Yeah.
So they always get this, like, slightly past their prime, like, attractive pretty boy to play Buck Williams that I think is really interesting. Nicolas Cage's Rayford Steele. I have a lot of complicated emotions that we don't need to unpack about this performance with Nicolas Cage.
Let's unpack them.
This movie is based off the book, yes, but it's based on like the first 40 pages of it. It's not based on the rest of the book, the rest of the stuff about him, the Antichrist shooting a guy and the tape that the pastor made. That's just not here.
Great.
It is best to me characterized as a disaster movie about the day of the rapture.
Okay.
So Nick Cage is trying to land a plane when a ton of people suddenly disappear. Many scenes are spent with Ray and Hattie trying to calm passengers down. At one point, Nick Cage is trying to avoid a head-on collision with an airplane whose pilots had both been raptured. So yes, to your earlier question, I think in the last episode, what happens to them? The plane's just flying.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, because it's on autopilot.
Oh, uh-huh.
This plane's flying. It's coming at Nick Cage's plane. He avoids it, but narrowly misses and gets one of his fuel lines damaged. So at the very end, it's this very climactic scene. Chloe, who almost killed herself but decided not to, helps create a makeshift landing zone for Nick Cage's plane and just barely makes it. The very last shot, Ray, Hattie, Buck, and Chloe reunite and get to a level of safety, but they look out and see a world that is ending.
Okay.
It's a disaster movie.
Who plays Hattie and Chloe?
Couldn't tell you.
Okay, fine.
But in the 2000 version, Hattie's played by Kirk Cameron's wife because she has to be in everything that he's in.
Oh, God. I think Kirk Cameron's wife, that's just her name. That's like her legal name.
I think she would appreciate that, yes.
Her name is Of Kirk.
Oh, no. So this movie's bad.
Yeah.
It has currently 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And 12 out of 100 on Metacritic.
12.
Some of my favorite reviews. Quote, there are millions of Christians with average or above average intelligence. I like to think I'm one of them. So what possessed the makers of Left Behind to produce such an ignorant piece of garbage that's easily one of the worst films of 2014, if not of all time? Christianity Today, quote, tried to give the film 0 stars, but our tech system wouldn't allow it. And then, this is my favorite quote. It's part of a larger review, but this part gets it. Score 1 for Satan.
That's so good.
It was nominated for 3 Razzies. Razzies are film awards for the worst films.
Yeah.
Opposite of the Oscars. Worst Picture, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Actor for Nick Cage. It lost all 3 to Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas. Which is, to be fair, an undoubtedly worse film.
That's incredible.
Kirk Cameron strikes again. For what it's worth, Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins loved this film.
Oh, God.
After watching an early screening of the film, LaHaye said, quote, it is the best movie I have ever seen on the Rapture. While Jenkins said, quote, I believe it does justice to the novel, and it will renew interest in the entire series.
Of the 2 movies I've seen about the Rapture, this is the best one.
Which, I guess about the Rapture, sure. This book, the book series, it's not actually about the Rapture. It's about everything after the Rapture.
Right.
And so I don't understand why they like this. That's not true. I don't understand. But in theory, I don't understand why they like this movie so much as opposed to the other one, which is a pretty faithful adaptation. Like the last movie, I find this one to be a very interesting moment in time. Importantly, that this movie was made after 9/11.
Oh,
which
yeah.
really impacts, it changes how the scenes of panic and horror on planes feel. After 9/11, America went really hard into dreary disaster movies. YouTuber Lindsay Ellis, may she rest in peace. She's alive. She's just not on YouTube anymore. Has many great videos on the topic about how 9/11 changed media. This movie fits right into that oeuvre. I had milieu written, but I like oeuvre better.
Oeuvre.
2014 is also near the end of the Obama years. Trump was just around the corner, but many liberals would not see it. So shitting on a dumb Raptures film was a fun pastime we could all appreciate. It didn't feel prescient to our political moment in the ways that it does now. Even the movie seemingly apologizes for being inspired by Left Behind. There's a scene early on with a Christian lady talking about the end of the world. And while she's technically proven right, in the language of the movie, we're supposed to see her as a crazy Christian lady. We're not supposed to empathize or sympathize with her. Again, this is mostly a disaster movie that uses the Rapture as a plot device, not a sermon like every other piece of media that comes from this. A few random notes before we move on. They made up a character for American Idol winner Jordan Sparks. She's on the plane and her kid gets raptured. I have no other thoughts than,
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, shout out Jordan Sparks. I haven't heard about her in a long time.
Yeah, well, that's what she's been doing in the meantime. You win American Idol and you get to star in a Left Behind movie.
Oh, my God.
There's a lot of weirdly offensive parts to this movie. There's a Muslim-coded character, I think, who is also just some white guy.
Oh, God.
He doesn't say he's Muslim, but he prays. He has a head wrap that I think is supposed to be indicative of Middle Eastern, but also isn't. I don't know. There's also a little person whose whole character is just angry, mostly at the Muslim-coded guy. And the last beat that the two of them get is the Muslim-coded guy kicks him down the emergency slide at the end in some sadistic comeuppance. It's played for laughs.
Oh, gross.
It's gross. It's not a good film.
Ew.
I watched this on Amazon Prime, which now has commercials because everything does, because capitalism's the worst.
It does?
Yeah.
Ew.
I know. But one of the commercials halfway through was for a magical girl anime series. Are you familiar with this genre of anime?
No.
It's about girls who get magical powers. It's a whole genre of anime. But it's also used mostly by weeaboos to create porn of all the girls.
Oh, God. What's a weeaboo?
A weeaboo is a white person who's very obsessed with a stereotype of Japanese culture.
Oh, okay.
Who would be like, I love Japan because they watched Naruto one time kind of thing. It made me laugh very hard. And again, I screamed a lot in my apartment, and I realized, but I screamed to my boyfriend that there is a magical girl commercial in my good Christian Nicolas Cage movie.
What was Nick Cage doing in this?
He was Ray. Oh, what was he doing?
I know. What's he doing? What's he thinking?
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird guy.
I don't know if this was before or after he went bankrupt from buying the dinosaur bones, which is a real thing that happened to him. Nick Cage is a fake person in my brain.
Nick Cage, just real quick, also bought this famous house.
I know the house.
In New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
And he built a tomb for himself in this famous graveyard in New Orleans. And they hated it so much, and they protested it so much that it became famous, and now they're protecting it to keep it.
Mm-hmm. To be fair, if I had ungodly amounts of money, it would also probably break my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
So before we talk about our final film, I want to pull back a little bit and talk about how this franchise intersects with politics.
Okay.
Its authors, Tim LaHaye, Jerry B. Jenkins, 100% believe this to be true. Like, obviously, it's a work of fiction, and Ray doesn't exist. The rapture hasn't happened. But the story about the rapture and the tribulation and the UN being a front for essentially the Illuminati is something LaHaye spent his entire life yelling about. As I said before, it's oversimplistic to say evangelicals believe this version of the rapture, which is called pre-tribulational, dispensational premillennialism, because of Left Behind.
Can you please sing that to Supercalifragilistic?
Pre-tribulational, dispensational premillennialism. The syllables don't work, but whatever. Syllables don't work. This story existed before LaHaye and Jenkins put pen to paper, and many people haven't read the books or seen the movies. However, the view that a lot of evangelicals have about the end of the world is heavily influenced by the cultural zeitgeist that was shaped by these two douchebags. Anecdotally, when I was an evangelical, I took this as truth. I thought this was what the Bible said about how the world's going to end. Because also, if you've ever tried to read end times prophecies, either in the book of Daniel or Revelation, they're impossible to read. Because they're written in a specific time and place about those events happening there. Also, maybe the person who wrote Revelation was on drugs. So it's impossible to read. It's impossible to make sense of. That's kind of the whole thing about end times prophecies. And so to have people who say, no, here's what it is. Let me string it together for you in an easily digestible narrative is really appealing for a lot of people. I believed it so much to the point that I remember actively disliking a church I tried out when they took a different interpretation to Revelation than the one that I had heard. I thought that they were just being anti-biblical. I thought they were being anti-Christian by not believing the Left Behind narrative of the rapture. And yes, that is about me and speaks a lot to how my thought process at the time. But I also very strongly suspect I was not alone in that. And I know a lot of people I listen to preach will preach similar things based on this.
Wow.
We see here the same problem we have when Dobson, when he talks about gender and child raising, the declarative authority of interpretation. But here's on steroids, as end times prophecies are, again by nature, impossible to decipher. Bible prophecies, history written in advance, is a quote from this book, and a sentiment I've heard time and time again when talking with evangelicals. And how you understand the prophecies is a question of power. That's what we see what we look for. This is why cognitive behavioral therapy works for people. It's limited, and we could talk endlessly about the limitations it has, for sure. But it is true that some people do have core beliefs that lead to depression. If you think yourself as fundamentally bad and unlovable, you're going to see evidence affirming that belief everywhere. Your coworker ignoring you becomes proof that everyone does, in fact, hate you. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps people learn to challenge these pieces of evidence and hopefully change some of these maladaptive core beliefs. Maybe that coworker is having a bad day. Maybe they were daydreaming and didn't even see you, right? But by providing a narrative framework for where the world is heading, evangelicals are also then primed to see evidence of the world heading in that direction everywhere. Left Behind reads end times prophecies to talk about a one world government, so things like the Illuminati or QAnon, which purport that a group of satanic elites are really controlling the world, seem perfectly reasonable. That backs up what you already believe. Left Behind says that the Antichrist will give a message of false peace, starting with universal disarmament. So any attempt of gun control is playing right into the devil's hands. Evangelicals also want the end of the world. If you subscribe to this belief system, Jesus returning and establishing heaven on earth is a wonderful thing. And of course they want that. There's no more pain or tears in heaven. But as we've talked ad nauseum, evangelicals have a ton of institutional power in the United States. So in effect, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And now, unfortunately, we have to talk about a guy named Mike Huckabee.
Ugh, Jake.
Brooke, who is Mike Huckabee to you?
To me.
To you. What's your personal relationship with Mike Huckabee?
Mike Huckabee. I don't want to talk about Mike.
We're going to talk about him for some time.
What is he, governor?
He was governor of the great state of Arkansas.
Yeah. And his daughter is Sarah Huckabee?
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was former Trump press secretary and now current governor of Arkansas, because nepotism.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And he's a bad guy, but I think I get him mixed up in my head with Ted Cruz.
They are very similar people, to be fair.
Which one's Huckabee?
Huckabee was governor of Arkansas. He ran for president a number of times, didn't succeed, like Ted Cruz. Mike Huckabee also had his own Fox News show.
Okay, right.
And that show is currently revamped on TBN.
On TBN.
It's amazing how often we come to TBN on this show, I will say.
Can you cut out the part where I didn't really know who Mike Huckabee was?
No, I think it's perfect because he's like one of those people, kind of like Ted Cruz, where like most people know the name or have heard of him, but they can't like quite place him.
Yeah.
He ran for president in 2008 in the Republican Party, obviously, and he won the Iowa caucuses.
Oh, yeah.
He also ran in 2016, but dropped out before the Iowa caucuses. I bring him up here because it was announced before I started writing this that he is going to be the new U.S. ambassador to Israel in the new Trump administration.
Oh, God. I didn't know that.
And even writing this and saying this aloud makes my stomach hurt.
Oh, God.
This is important because Mike Huckabee is a big left behind guy. He's a Christian Zionist to the extreme degree. He believes in Israel's central role in bringing about the apocalypse.
Oh, my God.
He regularly leads evangelicals on trips to Israel. Luis Moreno, a former U.S. ambassador to Jamaica who's interacted with him, recently called out Mike Huckabee's extremism on some of these trips. Quote, "I unfortunately was exposed to him during his trips to Israel back in the day. Full-blown and knowledgeable fanatic of the end times. Apocalypse, Israel's destruction, etc. A true and utter nutcase. Couldn't be a more dangerous selection."
Oh, great. I'm looking him up really quick.
In 2008, as part of his presidential run, Mike Huckabee said, and I am so sorry to quote this, quote, "Basically, there's no such thing as, I need to be careful about saying this, people get really upset. There's really no such thing as a Palestinian." Additionally, he has said, quote, "I never use the term West Bank. I find it offensive. We were talking about Judea and Samaria. We need to use the biblical language." Previously, he said he doesn't believe the West Bank is occupied. Calling it occupied makes it appear that someone is illegally taking the land. Which, this is Jake talking, is exactly what is happening in the West Bank. There are people living in that area for decades, generations. And then Israel said, that's our land, actually. The United Nations said, no, people live there. You don't just get to take their land. There's a whole multiple wars about it. And now Israelis, backed by their government, are just building communities there and saying, okay, it's your land, but actually it's our land now. It's our land. It's a whole international crisis. Mike Huckabee doesn't believe it's a crisis, thinks all of that land has actually belonged to Israel. And any attempt to deny that is anti-Christian, is of the devil.
Whoa.
Mike Huckabee will cheer on the genocide of Palestinians in the name of supporting Israel while taking perhaps one of the most anti-Semitic beliefs one can have. The point is suffering. Why is left behind? Why are evangelicals so interested in the 7 years of tribulation? They won't be here for it. Why do they have so many timelines and pictographs and sermons and lectures? Why is there a 15-book series about that time? It's in part because they want people to suffer. Why did LaHaye and Jenkins love the 2014 adaptation of Left Behind so much, despite it veering heavily from the source material? It's because it's a disaster movie, not despite it. They revel in the pain and suffering they believe people will endure, because they think those people, us, deserve it. The rapture would be the biggest I told you so imaginable. I told you so. I've been telling you this whole time, and now it's too late. You deserve what you're going to get. You deserve the locusts and the sores and the water turning into blood.
And the bull's breath.
Yes. The philosophy is us versus them, black and white, good and evil. Literally God versus the devil.
Wow.
But the sides are fundamentally opposed and incapable of changing. It preys on people's pre-existing biases of the bad guys. And you kind of get to superimpose whoever you think are the bad guys. If you think Muslims are going to try and take over the America and oppose Sharia law, all of a sudden, they're in the Illuminati for you. But if you're a little bit softer, a little bit more woke, it's not the Muslims. They're just misled, whatever. You don't have to count them in. Whoever you think the bad guys are gets to be the bad guys and the ultimate bad guys, servants of Satan. It's also why I keep saying this is one of the most anti-Semitic beliefs. I've said it in this episode. I've said it in other episodes. They are technically pro-Israel, but they're pro-Israel so that the Jewish people will die horribly. They have a holdout that some people will be saved and converted, right? But that's just anti-Semitism with extra steps. If this belief is to be true, then the only way for Jewish people not to be condemned to hell for all of eternity is to not be Jewish anymore. Mm-hmm. That's anti-Semitic. That's anti-Semitism of the highest degree. They can dress it up and say we're pro-Israel. They can say, Mike Huckabee says he's a Christian Zionist, but also says, I worship a Jew. I can't be anti-Semitic. It's all this distancing so they don't have to grapple with the real, tangible, material realities of the damage that they're causing.
Wow.
For what it's worth, I try to go out of my way not to demonize evangelicals as people. Because even as I think the evangelical ideology has to be fought at every possible step, I do not think people who are evangelical are irreparably bad people. I don't think they need to stop being Christians even. I know and love some evangelicals. Hell, I had Thanksgiving for people who voted for Trump and go to a church I'm sure I would hate every little bit about. I know I'm not always right, but no one is just good or bad. That I think is a piece of Christian morality that a lot of people who either aren't Christians or have deconstructed still hold on to. These are good people and these are bad people. Mm-hmm. Casting off every person who voted for Trump as fundamentally bad, as tempting as it might be, that's just Christian morality through a different lens. Even as I fundamentally disagree with them, I don't want people to suffer. I think Trump is going to cause catastrophic damage to many people, including people he voted for, especially poor people. And I don't take any delight in that. I see people online posting things like, that's what you get for voting for him. I just think that's gross. Anyway, I digress. Left Behind is both political in and of itself and represents and fuels a broader, intense political movement. But what happens to this story and this movement when something actually apocalyptic happens? We now turn to our final movie, Left Behind: Rise of the Antichrist, 2023. This movie builds itself as a sequel to the 2014 movie, and I guess it takes place after the rapture, but it was produced 10 years later with an entirely different cast and crew.
No Nick Cage.
No Nick Cage. Nick Cage did not come back. Todd McElmurray is written off for this film. I find Left Behind 2014 interesting because it's a post 9/11 movie. I find Left Behind 2023 fascinating because it's a movie...
Post-pandemic movie.
Post-COVID movie.
Yeah.
Yes. And in this movie, COVID is canon. COVID has happened, and COVID happens, and then the rapture happens. Rough time for Earth. It also, I think, is the first piece of fiction I've seen in which COVID is a thing. What I think is a broader conversation we all need to have about this kind of denial of COVID in our media, the fact that it's shaped the world. Anyway, different conversation. This movie takes place in 2022, 6 months post-rapture. It stars a bunch of unknown people and a guy named Kevin Sorbo.
Who's that?
Kevin Sorbo is probably, in the mainstream at least, most known for playing Hercules in the 90s film series Hercules: The Legendary Journeys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know the famous thing that he did? Where he shouted out his...
Disappointed! Yes, I do. I do know that.
Who that is?
Yep, so that's Kevin Sorbo.
Disappointed!
And I am disappointed in Kevin Sorbo. I first got to know him when he portrayed an evil, anti-theist philosophy professor in the movie God's Not Dead.
Oh.
Brooke, we will absolutely be talking about this movie at some point in the future. It's my annual Easter tradition. But he is crazy conspiracy theory Christian guy. Before we fully get to him, I want to talk about how the movie starts. The movie starts 2022, shortly after the pandemic, after the rapture. It starts with Buck, who is a news journalist, but also a TV personality. He has his own show. After some exposition, it's Buck hosting a news talk show. He's interviewing a scientist talking about the disappearances, as they're known, the rapture. The scientist has the following lines. See if anything raises any antenna for you. Talking about, how do we know what's going on? Don't you think the government's trying to control information? The scientist said, the biggest threat is disinformation. The scientist also said, the vanishings and our evidence comes from science. All of the data has been verified by the UN. Talking about the government's trying to make people scared. Well, scared people stay in their homes. Mm-hmm. At the end of the interview, Buck is cut off by the producers when he starts pushing back on the official line of science. He signs off with, quote, I wouldn't be so quick to sign up for a vanishing vaccine.
Ugh.
That's right, this movie is a COVID parallel.
Oh, God.
It probably is a good time to tell you that the movie is directed and stars Kevin Sorbo, who is a COVID nut. He's not a good actor, although...
Disappointed.
I, again, very disappointed in him. He did star in this year's Reagan biopic, because of course he starred in the Reagan movie. Also starring David Henry of Wizards of Waverly Place, who is not a good person. If you ever grew up with Wizard of Waverly Place, look into David Henry. Tell me you like him still. He's bad. I don't like him. He's in the Reagan biopic. Anyway.
There was a Reagan biopic this year?
Came out this year in like September. It's horrible. It's like all glamorizing of him. Unironically, most of the problems in modern American life can be traced back to Reagan. Reagan ruined everything, including brought James Dobson to prominence.
Yeah, that's right.
Nowadays, he's mostly known, not for being an actor, but for posting shit online. He's a big Trump supporter who actively supported him during the big lie and insurrection. Although now he says the insurrection was actually Antifa who did it, and it's bad, actually. Uh-huh. He's been accused of sexual assault and sexual harassment on movie sets. Not a ton of information about that. A lot of he said, she said, and obviously that means it didn't happen, of course.
Of course. Innocent until proven guilty.
He was a featured speaker at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, which is like the place for right-wing grifters to get involved in politics. And at that conference, he wore a suit lined in his own tweets.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he had the inside lining of his suit jacket lined with his tweets because he thought he was being shadow banned by the government.
This guy is such a loser.
He's such a loser, right? Like, I hate him, yes, but like, also, what a dweeb.
It's so cringy and dweeby. Ooh.
In a move that will shock no one, he is a COVID nihilist. Right, of course, because of course he is. Anyway, back to the movie. There's a moment in which Buck has a friend who's tracing the conspiracy of the Antichrist to control the media, complete with literal red string. We do indeed have a real problem with the monopolizing of media, especially the news. Disney owns fucking everything and everyone, it seems, and that's a problem. Sinclair Broadcasting has must-run segments that are literal propaganda, and most people don't even know that it's happening. This is a real thing that they're somewhat talking about, but it happens out in the open. And evangelicals love it. Anyway, Buck and his friends talk about the Great Reset, which is another conspiracy theory thing. The Antichrist being a true New World Order globalist, which is just like 4 different conspiracy theories packed together. All websites and videos about the Bible are gone from the internet, and the Bible app itself is censored. The church that they go to is graffitied with, quote, all souls matter. And also, God is dead. Which is both the Nietzsche quote that fucking every evangelical loves to harp on, and also a reference to God's not dead.
Oh my God.
I see you, Kevin Sorbo. I fucking see you.
Oh God.
A good guy is derided for, quote, believing 9/11 as a false flag operation. So kind of implying that they think it was. It ends with hopeful music and musical swells and the phrase, there are souls to be saved, and as long as there are, our mission is clear. I find this really interesting because this is a very different beat. It ends on this hopeful swelling note. Every other movie, even, and especially the ones that like Tim LaHaye loves, end on a very dour note. Yeah, these people are together and Christians now, but they have to face 7 years of tribulation. That's horrible.
Right.
This movie is hopeful about it.
They're like, we're into locusts.
It's weird because it's a very sad and horrific story and it lies ahead. It ends, though, on the same beat as God's Not Dead. God's Not Dead is, again, we'll get into it, a very bad movie. Bad stuff happens, whatever. But it ends on a very hopeful note with music swells. To me, it ends on a very emotionally and spiritually similar note. And I think it's just because Kevin Sorbo is a talentless hack and capable of making creative decisions.
But if he'd like to come on the podcast, we'd be happy to have him. What if Dobson wanted to be on this podcast?
I would let him. I would not be nice about it. I'd be honest about it. I wouldn't go out of my way to scream at him. But I would be very... I would not let him get away with shit either. I would want that. James Dobson, come on the podcast. Let's throw down, bitch.
I don't know, James. We'll contact our people. We'll talk about it.
Going into this project, my thesis was that Left Behind and The Rapture is used as a tool of political pressure on and for evangelicals. This movie proved my point and then some. It is the clearest example of it, soaked in every frame and piece of overwrit dialogue. To round out this episode, though, I want to examine why. Why has the story of Left Behind become so ubiquitous? I mentioned before there's a sadism to it. This is what you deserve. I think that is a big piece of it. It is a feature, not a bug. But it isn't why the story is so sticky. It's a draw. It keeps people there. But I've said before, I don't think most people are primarily motivated by hatred. It can be a strong supplement, but most people don't want to think of themselves as hateful. And it's really hard to keep people motivated through sheer hatred. I think the story and others like it are so resonant because they speak to real issues and real pain in the world. The narrative is stupid and flawed, but somewhere in there is truth. Like I mentioned, we do have a real issue with media censorship, but it's not against Christians, it's against Palestinians,
right?
Actual leftists, right? There is a small group of powerful people with an outside influence on the world in politics, but it's not a shadowy cabal. It's people we know, like Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Elon Musk bought this election and is trying to buy the one in the UK that's coming up. It's Darren Woods, the CEO of Exxon. It's Rupert Murdoch and his sons, the people who run Fox News. There are people who preach peace, but also push for war. But again, it's out in the open. People like Donald Trump, people call him Donald the Dove, despite the fact that he's one of the most warmongery people that do exist. He says and does whatever to get elected. Our rights and freedoms are being taken away, but it's not Facebook shadow banning Kevin Sorbo's posts. It's quickly losing the right to protest, like cops beating up student protesters protesting for Gaza, and the massive invasion of privacy tech companies have in our lives, which again, evangelicals love. They're very real problems that most people can somewhat correctly identify. And The Rapture gives a very sleek and sexy narrative about what's actually happening, and importantly, knowledge that you, as a true believer, will be okay. Premillennial dispensationalism isn't the only narrative to do this, by far. As I referenced earlier, there's a lot of parallels between this narrative and QAnon. So in doing this research, I found an incredible paper called The End of the World According to Q, published in 2021 in the Osprey Journal of Research and Ideas. This paper examines the link between evangelicalism, especially premillennialism, and QAnon. I squealed when I found this paper because I'm a fucking nerd. It's really good. The author, Francisco G. Mendoza III of the University of North Florida. You are my personal hero and my new best friend.
Well,
super brief overview of QAnon, a phenomenon that's also been a morbid fascination of mine since its inception. It started with an anonymous poster on internet forums leaving cryptic messages, predictions, usually related to Donald Trump, bringing a shadowy cabal, especially the Hill's Clinton, to justice and what they call the storm. The posts by Q are vague, contradictory at points, and somewhat nonsensical, and QAnon followers have spent countless hours trying to decipher and explain them amongst themselves. From the article, as Brian Feidberg, a senior Harvard researcher who studies QAnon, explains, the kind of literacy that's implied here, close reading and discussion of the texts that are accepted as authoritative, has quite a bit in common with how evangelicals learn to read and interpret the Bible, end quote. This type of reading, one meant to dissuade doubts, involves reading the text loosely, figuratively, or literally, depending on the context in which it's applied. Not only is it comparable to evangelical readings of scriptural texts in terms of framework, but it's also mechanically as a deeply participatory endeavor, and which some have compared to the way that augmented reality games function. Much like playing a game or those reading biblical scriptures to glean divine insight to the problems of their lives, cues, drops, posts function as a compass which can be used to help navigate the reader through confusing and political realities that they face. So the ways that people read QAnon posts, deciphering it, using every word, this is a reference to this other thing that may or may not be actually true, is mechanically the same as how Tim LaHaye and evangelicals like this read rapture, end times theory. Oh, they talk about Jesus meeting believers up in a cloud. That's the rapture. I can tie that together. And it's, you get to participate in it. You get to be an active player in discovering the mysteries of the universe.
It's like when Taylor Swift leaves hidden clues in her song.
Yes, it's like how Swifties will say Taylor Swift is gay because she did a thing despite being one of the most painfully heterosexual person in the world. This speaks to the network part of both these ideologies. We've talked about this before, but extremism needs a narrative, a network, and a need. This speaks to the network part of this. Not only are you getting some insight into the true machinations of the universe, you are with others in on the secret. You and them get to be the main characters. From the paper again, quote, again, this is similar to the ways that scripture is often read by evangelicals, especially prophetic texts such as the Book of Revelation, where the pieces that are meant to be put together, but it is only when the events come to pass that can be truly considered to be a complete mosaic. You get bits and pieces. Okay, I think it's this. I think it's over here. But only once it's happened do you get to look in hindsight and be like, oh yeah, that's what that passage meant. That's how it all tied together. Other than being interactive conspiracy theories, what do these have in common? Again, from that same paper, quote, QAnon's alliance with evangelicals here makes sense, for it provides a way in which to explain the vast, complicated networks of power and influence, which make the system of global capitalism tick without looking directly at the sun. Left behind, QAnon, climate denialism, whatever, these narratives function as enticing distractions meant to pacify enough of the public to avoid messing with the actual power structures of society, and in so doing, not actually address any of the real issues. The problem here is, as it is time and time again, capitalism. I want to take a moment and talk a little bit more about what I mean with capitalism, because I think it's often misunderstood and poorly defined. Capitalism is not just money. It's not just buying things. Capitalism is an economic system that, at least in its current iterations, is seemingly only interested in infinite growth. Why is Facebook trying to surveil you as much as possible? Are they investing billions upon billions of dollars in AI, wasting massive amounts of water and electricity for bad search engines and soulless pieces of so-called art because the devil told them? No. It's because Mark Zuckerberg is not an inhuman monster. It's because they're business decisions that will make Facebook more money for their stockholders. Why is Amazon making conditions for their employees abysmal to the point that they're doing crimes? Not because they hate people, but because it is cheaper for them to abuse people and pay a lawsuit here and there than to actually make hospitable and respectable working conditions. Why do massive corporations donate to both political parties and, in essence, buy our elections? Not because they're Satanists who want to eat babies, because it's profitable for them.
Right.
These are real issues. And most people, I think, would agree with that. It makes sense. It passes the smell test. I don't think it requires absurd leaps in logic like adrenochrome or fucking whatever. In fact, that's part of the reason I think these other theories catch on. There isn't any secret knowledge. There's nothing to decode. It's not glamorous. It's not sexy. It's greed. It's narcissism. That's boring. That's unsatisfying. It makes us feel powerless. When people try to make sense of their pain and their sense of helplessness, Left Behind, and evangelicalism more broadly, takes the page from the book of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 12 winner Jada Essence Hall and says, "Look over there!" I'm very proud of that reference.
That was really good. I'm really glad you could bring that back to Drag Race.
I am fundamentally a very gay person. Okay. One more quote from the paper, which is focused on QAnon, but I think this fits perfectly for Left Behind's story and kind of all the bits of evangelicalism we've talked about. One analysis of the QAnon phenomenon reveals that a working class, unable to come to grips with the enormity of the structures of power and the profit-seeking, emotionless, and amoral functions of those structures, becomes somewhat pacified by the attribution of individualized moral reason to them, even if that moral reason is one of absolute and ultimate evil. To believe that the U.S. government is run by satanic pedophiles is bad, but then you can subscribe to it. Be like, oh, that's God's work.
Right.
We don't have to do anything about it. We just get to pray and prepare ourselves for the end times. So, Brooke, what do you think of Left Behind?
I hate it. Remember when you started and I was like, yay!
You were so excited.
This is going to be so funny and fun. And then now I'm so depressed and sad and just, I hate it. I don't want to watch it. I hate LaHaye. I hate Jenkins. I hate Kirk Cameron. Now I kind of hate Nick Cage.
I will say, it is not Nick Cage's best performance.
Okay.
His heart is not in it. You can tell.
Is any performance Nick Cage's best performance?
His performance in National Treasure is pretty good.
Okay, that's fair.
Those are also the two Nick Cage movies I've seen. Are you ready to become an evangelical to avoid living through nuclear war and blood water?
No. Oh. I'm down for the blood water. Let's go.
Sounds fun. Sounds like you got a lot of really good iron.
Yeah. I didn't really like this time that we spent together here in the third part of recording today.
I like that first part a lot.
Remember the gentle Christmas stories I was telling earlier?
Oh.
This is dark and scary. I feel unhappy. I feel like I want you to go on a vacation. and I hated it. But I love you.
I love you too. Good news for us. This is our last recording of the year.
Look at us.
And so, reader, this is for you all. What did you think of these 2 episodes? Honestly, this was a really interesting project for me. Again, I spent way too much time and concern for the people who love me. But I found it really interesting. As we look to the new year, I want to explore ways to grow and cultivate the show. If you'd be interested in us going through the rest of these books, probably more focusing on the plot and the wackety-schmackety ideas like episode 1, let us know. I also really want to sit down and watch God's Not Dead with you, Brooke.
Yes.
And not just recap it. I want your live, authentic reactions. Because
yes.
I could tell you the plot, but you have to experience it.
No, I'm pretty good at hate watching things.
Uh-huh.
So I'm down for that.
I was unable to find many comments by James Dobson, specifically on Left Behind. But many, many, many articles talk about James Dobson and Tim LaHaye together. Like it's James Dobson, Tim LaHaye, fucking pick your guy, the Fowls, whatever. They shaped evangelical culture and each other. It's this fucking circular human centipede Ouroboros of bullshit.
Oh God, Jake, not the human centipede.
That's how their beliefs in this book makes me feel. They continue to do so, even if the main figureheads are fading, or in Tim LaHaye's case, thankfully, is dead. Boy, oh boy, Brooke, do I hate them very, very much.
I hate all of them. And mostly James Dobson.
Mostly James Dobson.
He's the reason for the season.
James, to me, Tim LaHaye is awful and absurd, sure. But also, most people are like, well, he's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
James Dobson still has a really strong, name ID and, well, he's a doctor. Well, he has some, real beliefs. I'm glad we took this detour. I actually had a lot of fun with this. But James Dobson's still the main villain in my mind.
Yeah. LaHaye.
Hey, LaHaye girl.
LaHaye girl.
Anyway, hopefully I will have purged this from my system.
Jake, I want you to know one thing.
Yeah.
If there's a rapture,
mm-hmm.
I hope you and I are left behind.
Oh my God. We'd have so much fun.
We would have so much fun.
I'm down for the Antichrist.
Yeah, right? I mean, whatever. That's cool.
The first, 3.5 years? Sound like a pretty good time.
Yeah. I mean, the plagues, we'll figure it out. But,
yeah.
I mean, I'm almost 50. It's like...
That's basically a plague in and of itself. Aging, that's the real plague.
I'm not almost 50. Cut that part out. 45. I haven't given up yet.
I'm basically 50.
No. You're not even 30.
I'm on the other side of 25. It's more round up.
Wait, how old are you? 28?
27.
Good Lord. I feel like I'm always asking you how old you are, and I get younger and
I'm
younger.
19.
Yeah, that is how it's going to be sometime. All right, listen. I hate everything. I'm depressed now. We should have ended with the Christmas one. You were right. And I'm excited for our time together when we're left behind.
Me too. Hopefully, until then, I'll stop having rapture nightmares.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm going to keep smoking weed.
Bye.
Bye. I Hate James Dobson is a labor of love, written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. I'm honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it, and if you want to connect with us more, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, and Blue Sky at I Hate James Dobson, and, unfortunately still, on Twitter at I Hate JDobs. If you want to email us, you can do so at ihatejamesdobson@gmail.com. Special thanks, as always, to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, and Jack. Our theme music is by Mood Maze, and the song is called Trendsetter. Thank you for enjoying the show.